What is up, Breaking Bad fans? Kino here, and we are back with another Breaking Bad log. Today we're looking at the fourth episode of Season 1, Cancer Man. Now, I know the previous Breaking Bad logs have been a little on the short side. I feel like those episodes were more a setup and more, action-oriented, rather than this episode, which I think is the first one where we really start to dig into Walter's emotions, dig into who he is as a character, and setting up the journey he's going to take throughout the series. And I think the same is true for Jesse. We really start to explore who he is in this episode. And as a result, this episode's a little on the longer side here. So I think that's going to continue moving forward. I think these episodes are going to get, more and more complex as we, dig into this series. So we have that looking forward to. But without further ado, let's jump into the episode. This is Cancer Man. We open the episode with Hank giving a debrief to the DEA, explaining their next operation. They reveal that Crazy 8 was actually a snitch, and it was actually him that gave up his own cousin Emilio. They also analyze the meth they found in Crazy 8's car, and find that it's 99.1% pure. This is something they have never seen before, and Hank says that given this skill set, there might be a new kingpin in town. This speech is contrasted with Walt brushing his teeth in his underwear, and again, this kind of contrast is meant to undercut Walt's bigger-than-life reputation with his actual unimpressive physicality. After the title, we cut to a barbecue at Walt's house. Walt clearly has some PTSD over killing Crazy 8, as the meat on the grill reminds him of what he did to those two people. The family then sits down to eat, and Walt tells the story of how he met Skyler. Skyler starts crying, though, and runs off, forcing Walt to reveal to his family that he has lung cancer, something he's been trying to avoid. His family then discuss what to do about the diagnosis. Marie suggests that they go to another oncologist for a second opinion, and gets a recommendation from her job as a radiologist. While alone, Hank promises that no matter what happens, he'll take care of Walt's family. He means this as a supportive gesture, but Walt doesn't like it, as it wounds his pride. This will become a central theme of Walt's character moving forward, of how he conflates being vulnerable with being weak. Meanwhile, Jesse is hanging out with his friends, and we're introduced to two characters, Combo and Skinny Pete. They smoke some of Walt's meth, which, while potent, makes Jesse extremely paranoid. He has a hallucination of these tough bikers coming to attack him, and ends up running out from his house. In reality, though, it was just Mormon missionaries, though I'm not sure which one is worse, to be honest. Not wanting to return home, Jesse instead returns to his parents' house. This is where we're first introduced to his mom, his dad, and his younger brother Jake. They're hesitant to allow him back, though, as he has a history of drug problems. However, they end up acquiescing, and Jesse stays in his childhood room. As he goes through his old things, he finds some drawings he did as a kid. One of these is actually a crude drawing of Mr. White, on the back of a test that he ended up failing. We'll learn more about this later, but Jesse is actually very artistic, and as Walt said on this test, if he had applied himself, he might have turned out differently. Back at the White House, Skyler arranges for Walt to be seen by the best oncologist in New Mexico. Walt is worried about the cost of the visit, though, and agrees to use some of the drug money to pay for the treatment. Walter Jr. comes in while he's doing this, and complains that Walter is acting weird, acting like nothing is happening. This is also a growing trend in Walt, that in an effort to put on a strong facade, he begins to alienate his family by not telling them the truth about what's going on with him. Shots like this one highlight the growing distance between himself and his family. Jesse meanwhile gets a call from Combo. He says that his friends want to buy the ultra pure meth and will pay a much higher price for it. Jesse makes the deal, then shows up at Walt's house unannounced. He also asks if Walt would want to start cooking again, but after their last ordeal, Walt tells him to get lost. Jesse then gives him his half of the deal, though, which ends up being a lot of money. Walt and Skyler then meet with Dr. Del Cavoli, the best oncologist in the state. He suggests a treatment of chemotherapy and surgery, which could prolong Walt's life. He also warns, though, that there could be unpleasant side effects from the chemotherapy. On top of that, there's also the matter of the cost, which would end up being about $90,000 out of pocket because the doctor is not in their health plan. Walt doesn't want to leave Skyler with all that debt, in the likely case that he ends up still dying. She, however, wants to do whatever it takes to help him, showing that she really did love Walt at the beginning of the series. I think fans should keep this in mind when they're trying to judge her character. Meanwhile, Jesse hangs out with his little brother Jake. Jake is a prodigy, excelling at school, sports, and extracurriculars, basically the exact opposite of Jesse. Jesse says that Jake is their favorite son. However, Jake says that Jesse is because he's the only one their parents ever talk about. However, later, their maid finds a joint in Jesse's room. His parents, having had enough of Jesse's drug habit, kick him out of the house. It turns out, though, that it's Jake's weed, and Jesse ends up covering for him. He destroys the joint, though, saying that it's skunk weed. Although in reality, I think he's just trying to protect Jake from going down the same path that he did. This is the first instance we see of Jesse being very protective of children. And just like Walt, this is going to become a central part of his character. At the end of the episode, Walt sees Ken, an obnoxious stockbroker he saw earlier at the bank. Ken is a douchebag, and Walt, fed up with just taking everything in his life, decides to bite back. While Ken is at the gas station, Walt opens up the hood of his BMW and puts the squeegee on the battery. This causes a fire, which blows up the car. Ken has no idea what's happening, as Walt walks away from the explosion like a badass.
Cool guys don't look at explosions. They blow things up and then walk away.
Now I know that this is the moment Walt became Heisenberg memes, and all the variants are played out, but this is an important moment for Walt's character. This is the first time we see him take an aggressive action purely for himself. Every time before this, it was out of necessity to defend himself against the likes of Crazy 8 and Emilio. This time, though, it's out of pure spite. And though it feels like justice, since Ken is of course an asshole, we'll see that Walter will become addicted to the kind of power he has over the course of the series. As for some final notes, the title Cancer Man comes from The X-Files, the show that Vince Gilligan worked on before Breaking Bad. The movie that Walter Jr. is watching on the television is Earth vs. the Flying Saucers, a 1956 science fiction film. And as for some final opinions about the episode, I have to say that I don't really like Jake as a character. Mostly for the fact that they never bring him up again after this episode. They have an odd mention of him in Season 3, and they'll reference him in the movie, of course. But it doesn't really ever feel like Jake is an important part of Jesse's character, which I question why even involve him in the series to begin with. And that is pretty much the episode. So thank you guys so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next Breaking Bad log, coming soon. I have patrons. It's bad. Tommy Smith, Abdallah Alamari, Russell, Sean, Heart of Markness, Broccoli, Logan, Clean, John Reyna, Jesse Sterling, Andrew Stewart, Ops Gracing Media, Daz J. Kit, Conan Higgins, Irish Nachos, Sam Cedarlin, Don Lucania, and Celery Man.